the MasterBuilt 560 gravity smoker. So here's the unboxing and assembly of the packaged unit from the Home Depot. It went pretty smoothly. There wasn't any gotchas as long as you followed the instructions. There's a particular order that you need to put the legs together. It's pretty straightforward. Went together smoothly. Might be a little easier if you have two people, but it wasn't too hard to do it by myself. One thing that's worth noting is it's probably best to wear some latex gloves because there's definitely some oil covered pieces. And here's the burn-in process. So I set the camera up to record the screen as best I could, and you can kind of watch as I load it and try and light it for the first time. I ended up buying some of those tumbleweed items linked in the description, and they worked really well. I first tried to use just a rolled up piece of paper towel, and that didn't take. It took me a few tries to get it going. But once you light one of those tumbleweeds and you set the temperature, it's pretty straightforward. I did have a little bit of trouble connecting the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to my router and phone respectively, but after the updates that were released on May 22nd, everything has been going really well. The time to temperature was really fast. Once the coals get hot and it starts really cooking, it can adjust automatically very fast. And here's my first crack at trimming a Texas style brisket. I've never done this before, so you can see I kind of fumble around a bit, but I think it went pretty well. Cut off all the hard fats as best I could and tried to leave the fatty side with about 1/4 inch as recommended by multiple sources on the internet, the experts, if you will. I definitely enjoyed this process and getting in there and learning, what's done to typical briskets that I've purchased in my day. It's a really enjoyable process. One thing I did learn along the way was the seasoning for the brisket, which here is comprised of salt and pepper. Definitely want to salt it a little lighter on the ends because as it cooks and shrinks, just the concentration of seasoning ends up being a little higher towards the ends. So, food for thought there. One other thing I ended up doing was taking a couple pieces of the hard fat and putting them on the top shelf of the smoker to let them drip down on the meat as it was being cooked, and it seemed to work pretty well. So here you can see me digging in, trying to get that deep recessed fat on the bottom side of the brisket there. One thing worth noting, and it's probably obvious to everyone watching this, but having a really nice sharp knife is extremely helpful. The next project I have may be making a larger cutting board. As you can see, the brisket is hanging over the edges on almost every side. And this is a 12.5 pound brisket, untrimmed, so it'll probably cut about 2 or so pounds off in the trimming process. This is the top side you see me trimming here, and this is the side you want to be about 1/4 inch thick. And once we cut it towards the end, you'll see the thickness of the fat really gets excessive if you leave any more than that on, and you really want that fat to render into the meat from the smoke, and anything thicker than what I'm guessing 1/4 inch would just really be a whole lot of excess. Again, this is a pretty enjoyable process, especially if it's one of your first times doing it, so I don't see anybody having too much of a problem with that. As I mentioned earlier, it's just 1/4 cup of coarse ground pepper and 1/4 cup of coarse salt. I ended up using Himalayan salt because that's what I had at my local Costco, and I just mixed them up in a little bowl, as you can see, and it went on pretty smoothly. I Didn't put any olive oil or anything on. I just put the seasoning on, patted it in. If you rub it, it'll definitely curl up in little balls, but patting it is definitely the way to go. So this being my first time ever cooking a brisket, or ever smoking a brisket rather, I got up pretty early at 5 and set the whole system up and got everything ready to go. I had left the brisket in the refrigerator overnight with the seasoning on it, and everything went smoothly. This was a few days ago, so it was before all the updates for the Wi-Fi, and it was giving me a little bit of trouble, but ultimately everything was going pretty well, and this is turning out to be a really good system. And here you can see me putting a couple pieces of the hard fat on the top racks to hopefully drip down. And here's a time lapse of the cook throughout the entire 8+ hour process. I didn't really check on it the entire time, I just let it do its thing. Pulling the brisket off. Looked really good. Once I took the brisket off, I let it rest for about an hour in the foil, and let that meat reabsorb all the juices as best we could. In that, we waited as long as possible because we were starving, and cut it up, and it was worth it. Texas style brisket. And if anyone has any suggestions or idea on how to do this better the second time, I'm all ears. Thank you. If you want to know what tools and things I use, I'll put the links in the descriptions below. Thanks for watching.